Najarian here, and you know what's coming up, the Rebel's Edge. And we're going to be talking about Nvidia and exactly why it's not reacting well today. Bang! Bang!
Bang! Here we go. All right. John, I like that walking thing, man. That's good. And I like the hat too, the 10X.
Oh yeah, the 10. I'll have to get you some 10X gear, Pete.
I got nothing. That damn Cardone.
Yeah, geez, Cardone, the least you could do is send us a few more hats, for God's sake. I got the bands too, Pete, the wristbands.
I got nothing.
Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, folks. I'm Jon Najarian. He is Pete Najarian. And Jared, we want to thank Jared for doing all the stuff that he does.
Giddy up.
Giddy up. The gold. I love gold.
I love gold.
Yeah.
We haven't talked gold in a while.
Oh, and luckily we haven't seen that scene where he peels a piece off of his skin and eats it.
Yeah, we don't need that.
No. But this is the Rebel's Edge, folks, and we appreciate you joining us. It's the last Rebel's Edge of the holiday week because, as you know, we're about to put the brakes on pretty hard here in terms of trading volumes, probably falling off a lot going into the travel. No trading tomorrow and only half a day on Friday rather. So Black Friday, half a day, and Pete, the NFL, Black Friday. First time they've ever done a game on Black Friday. So Miami, that should be interesting. All right, well, let's kick it off, Pete, with Macro Minute, and let's talk about Sam Altman. He is the co-founder of course, OpenAI. Microsoft put billions into OpenAI, and it's, as far as we can tell, paying big dividends already. And they basically stole him when OpenAI made him resign on Friday. And then next thing you know, Pete, he's back over at OpenAI, and Microsoft says, look, we own more stock in this thing than anybody. We want this guy heading it up. And so he's back with all 700 employees. It's a pretty cool deal overall.
I think it's a great deal, and I think I'll tell you what, John. I think there's a lot of credit goes to Satya Nadella on how he handled this whole thing. He saw a mistake, he made a move, and then they made the next move, and here they are going once again. So hats off to you, Satya. You're doing a great job. That's why we see something like Microsoft, John, hitting all-time highs, because they've got the right guy at the helm. You and I said it long ago when they got him, and they made the decision to grab him, and not the decision to go with some former car guy from Ford to run Microsoft. I mean, I remember who said it, and I'll never forget it because I thought that was potentially one of the stupidest things I'd ever heard. But I think that the reality was that Satya was the right person. They did the right thing, and that's why that stock, that company is doing so well.
Yeah, and I think those other 4 board members, Pete, that basically demanded his resignation on Friday, they're all gone.
Should be.
Now and I said on Twitter a little bit ago, I bet they're going to get lots of nice coal in their stockings this year. Can you imagine a dumber thing than they wanted to get rid of the 2 co-founders and basically gut the company? I don't understand. But anyway, cooler heads and smarter heads prevailed. Yeah. Let's talk, Pete, for a sec about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Always one of the crowd favorites. And today it's crude oil, which fell by 5 full percent today, Pete. Back down after OPEC Plus delayed their meeting. That's my fantastic future.
I'm going to give you a double animal style. So how about this? You're hitting crude. I'll hit nat gas. We started November 1st. Nat gas was trading $3.60. Now, $2.80. That's a pretty significant drop, folks. Unbelievable in this short period of time. The other thing I'd throw out there, we don't have a show tomorrow, obviously. John mentioned it already, Thanksgiving. How about volatility? We are at 52-week lows underneath 13. Who would have thought that maybe a month, 2 months ago, that we would be going from 23 down to 20, back to 23, all through this whole chain, but now to be in the 12s. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I think there's a lot of different reasons, John, that are connected to this whole thing. But I'll tell you what, I think that's why we're seeing, even a day like today, up another couple hundred points. I mean, the markets are loving what's going on in the bond market and the treasuries and everything else. And we are seeing some great moves in the market.
Yeah, we are. And back and forth moves, Pete. I mean, like Nvidia yesterday came out with their earnings. You know, this is the first stock we're focused on here. It was up, then it was down. Then this morning it opened almost unchanged and then traded to the downside by $20 like that. Basically, demand for their products is high, except, Pete, in China.
Yeah.
Demand might be high, but we can't sell them anymore in China, apparently, because the government basically put the brakes on that. That might be one of the things that I'd agree with about the administration. But the question is, do the other regions of the world pick up the slack from China? Because otherwise they're going to get a lot less sales, Pete.
Yeah, that's true. But I would tell you this, John, one of the things that I never liked about the company itself, Nvidia, was everybody would just put blinders on, right? And what were they putting blinders on? They were talking about what was really going on in the stock, and yet they didn't really figure in what was the the PE, the price versus the earnings. It was extraordinarily high. It's not high anymore. It's now built itself into this position where, with the stock somewhere between 470 and call it 400, when you look at this stock now, John, it's trading at a forward PE of 31. That makes it pretty daggone interesting now because it's inexpensive. They've got incredible free cash flow. They crushed the numbers absolutely everywhere. But the one hanging negative thing, as you mentioned, is China. And if that ever opens up again, then watch out. But even without that, I still think that they're in a great position right now, John, and they can spend money if they need to, the CapEx, whatever they need to do. I think this company now sits very, very nicely at, call it 485, 490, 500, whatever.
I agree. I think I'm not one of the guys that when it was down $20 would say, it's got to go back down and break 400 again and go into the threes. It could do that, but that would be based on a lot more than just China, Pete, because there's plenty of demand for their chips. You and I both know it. And China, well, that would be the cherry on top if that comes back. Sort of like those traders behind me. Let's talk, Pete, about Guess. Guess Jeans, which is GES, and they came out with numbers. Basically, they had been outperforming for a couple of years. The share price was up 30% over 3 years. But all of a sudden, they come out with some numbers last night. They lowered guidance, which you and I always say is something that's going to get you hit. And they projected, 267 to 274. I think that was what the earnings they were projecting, Pete. Consensus was 296. So that's weak guidance. And that's the reason they were hitting it with both hands today.
I even forgot this company was still publicly traded. But anyway, when's the last time you saw a pair of Guess jeans? Let's be honest. Like 1988, maybe 1989. I don't know. But anyway, you're right though, John. When we talk about it every single day and week and whatever when we're on here on the Rebel's Edge, so we can help people, right? Understand what's going on. It's great what you did in the quarter, but then you still got to prove something else. How do things look in the future? What are your projections? What is your guidance? And this guidance was low. You already addressed that. And because of that, definitely some pressure on the stock, and they're going to have to prove something. Now, all that being said, it trades at a PE of 7, John. So this thing, it's very reasonably priced right now. Would I take a shot? Probably not. But I would say this. We start to see some option activity come into this name. We start to see a little bit of something Momo-wise that's going to maybe move it to the upside. Maybe they figure out something a little bit better than suspected over the next couple quarters. I think it's a name to at least have on your list, put it on your computer, and just check it out each and every day to see where it is. Because at some point, if they can keep up what they're doing, this is a company that does have some upside, I think. It's been beaten down for the right reasons, but I think you could potentially buy it if the things line up to that show us that maybe the guidance was just a little too aggressive.
And Pete, this follows along the lines of two other gene companies. Basically, American Eagle Outfitters. Yes, I know they make more than jeans, but also Abercrombie and Fitch. Individual names like that are the ones getting hit. The broad market offering, where people can select from a much broader selection of goods, is what has done better in this particular cycle. It's not the name brands, it's those that offer that much wider offering. All right, let's talk about John Deere. John Deere, or Deere and Company, symbol DE, down today. The world's largest farm equipment maker basically gave also profit estimates below street estimates, Pete. And for that reason, the stock dropped pretty hard, pretty fast. What's your take on whether or not you jump in here?
You know, John, I normally would say, you know what, it's getting pretty intriguing because the stock's getting beat up pretty good. It has not performed the way something like maybe Caterpillar or something else. The performance for Deere has just not been there. But you look at some of those numbers and the declines. 2023, John, net income, $10 billion. What are they projecting for 24? $7.75 billion to $8.25 billion. Those numbers are pretty large. I think the problem is multifaceted. And what do I mean by that? This is a problem for Deere, and it's got a lot to do with what's going on from a financing perspective and farmers and what they can and can't afford. But what does that do to food in the future here? What are the costs gonna be if they're not able to farm the way they'd like to and need to? I think we are going to be putting ourselves into a position where we're going to see some of the food prices. We talk about it all the time and the volatility and why do they strip out, fuel and food? Well, this is exactly why, because we might see the prices of food really start to rocket to the upside.
Well, it's a fact that their financing costs are the same as commercial real estate and home buyers, as well as car buyers, Pete. The higher that financing cost goes, the more people you cut out of who can actually afford to buy any of those things I just mentioned. And John Deere, unfortunately, if they're selling $10 billion worth of stuff a year ago, and now they're saying maybe 8, that has to come into your calculus, whether or not we see a big drop in interest rates in the future. If we do, I'm sure they'll do fine. If we don't, I'm sure they'll warn us again. All right, let's talk about Autodesk, Pete. The stock down fairly hard. They're a AutoCAD and the design company, and some filmmakers have even used Autodesk to make movies. James Cameron is one of them. The guy that did Terminator and The Abyss and the Titanic and all that kind of stuff, Avatar. Anyway, their billings were down by 11%, double-digit drop. There's almost no way you're going to put a positive earnings spin on that if your billings are down 11%.
Yeah, they had some numbers that were pretty shockingly bad, John. The revenue strength in the Americas was actually something that I looked at. I liked what I saw there. They had growth of about 18%. Outside of that, though, it's not just about the Americas. This is one of these companies that is obviously a global company. So it's understandable why there's pressure on them. They're going to have to prove something going forward. Again, just like we've talked about with some of the others, they've got to figure it out, and they've got to position themselves where those billings numbers start to turn the other way. If not, this is a company that could continue this downward slide, and I would be a little bit nervous, a little bit apprehensive to jump in this name until they can prove to us that they can make that kind of a move and start to get a little bit more of that momentum to the upside.
Yep. Well, to Pete's point, momentum is definitely to the upside today, folks, because the mid-session numbers, Dow's up 200, NASDAQ's up 100, S&P's up 24. So it's a pretty nice setup going into the holiday weekend. But you watch how fast the brakes start coming on, folks. Not brakes to the downside. I mean volume slowing down with every 10-minute period throughout the rest of the day. All right, Pete, what do we got as far as Red Zone sports today?
Well, John, you can see on the panel up there we got Boston. Or is it really Boston? Should it really be Minnesota? And here's why I say that. Boston came to Minnesota and Minnesota ripped them apart. And you take a look at what the Timberwolves are doing this year, John. They are one of the very top. They're right there with Boston. They beat Boston, but Boston has a record of 11-3. The Timberwolves right now are 10-3. So why is it that the Timberwolves are suddenly a pretty good basketball team? Well, Anthony Edwards is definitely a huge reason. The guy averages about 26 points a game. But our big three, John, we've got three centers. Now, one of them is more of a shooter, and that's Karl Anthony Towns. And he has been spectacular and aggressive. And he's a little bit different this year than he's been. It feels like he's more invested in the team, and he likes what he's doing. And he also likes that Rudy Gobert, the other center, who's 7'1", is doing one hell of a job being a rebounder, which is what he was brought in for, right? He was in there to clear things out, get offensive and defensive rebounds. He's done an amazing job with that. The guy blocks shots. You're not going to get a lot of points out of him, but he's averaging about 12 points. He's also averaging about 12 rebounds per game. So when you look at that, then there's one other guy, John, named Naz Reid, another guy near 7-footer who everybody loves him. Now he's a backup center, so he comes in for either of the guys. He comes in for whoever they want him to go in for, but he is a rebounding freak and a guy who doesn't care about ego, doesn't care about shooting. It reminds me of the days a little bit of Michael Jordan with the Bulls and how they played, John. A bunch of big guys in the middle that didn't really care if they scored a lot or not, but they just, they wanted to make sure they won. Well, that's kind of what these guys are trying to do here with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And then you've got a bunch of second-tier players who are doing an outstanding job. They know their role. Timberwolves could be an interesting team. I'm not saying they get past Denver, and that will be who they're going to have to face eventually at some point in time, late in, once they get through the season and all. But right now, they're on fire, and their defense has been incredible this entire run so far early on in the NBA season.
Yeah, and to your point, Pete, the fact that they've got such they're not just beating up on the little sisters of the poor. When Boston comes to town, they're coming to win. And that's a great team. I love watching Boston play. And now I've been kind of switching over to watching how the Timberwolves play, and even some of the shenanigans, like some of the fights that go on, because they are definitely a spunky bunch, Pete. So I kind of like that about them too.
Yeah, I like it. They've got a lot of role players who understand. They're role players, and they're okay with that. This older guy who's a guard, Conley, is a heck of a basketball player. You know what? He's kind of at the old side of his, position and all, but he's probably got 2-3 years left in him or something like that. And I think, can they make a run? They can make a run. Can they get by Denver? Denver's pretty damn good, so I'm not going to go that far. But they've got things moving in the right direction. Speaking of that, how about the NCAA football weekend? Now, this is the one of these weekends where everybody looks forward to it, all the rivalries and everything else. Well, unfortunately, John, not all the rivalries are still in place the way they once were. Yeah, Alabama's going to play Auburn. That's going to happen. Auburn's pretty awful this year. But
that's the Iron Bowl.
The Iron Bowl, right. But you do get Michigan playing at home against Ohio State without Jim Harbaugh. That's going to be a big one. Can Michigan do it? So I'll throw out these three games, John, and then you tell me who you think has the better upper hand in these. Michigan's at home, no Harbaugh, but that team loves Jim Harbaugh. I don't know if you've kept up with what they're saying as a team, and they're basically flipping off the rest of the NCAA saying, hey, look, okay, so you think we're stealing plays, really? How about if we just run the ball on you? We'll just run the ball 30 plays in a row, the same thing, and then just see if you still think that we're getting that advantage because of what we have watched or whatever and all the rest of that. I love what they're doing there. You got Oregon State. That's a biggie because Oregon wins that game and they get a shot at Washington again. Maybe, just maybe, they get into the football Final Four, John. That could be pretty interesting because I think Florida State is out. Not only are they out, but I think they're out to stay out because the quarterback is gone. he was that team. They have a lot of great other role players, but that quarterback is probably a top, 6, 8 pick or something like that, depending on. I mean, the guy is pretty unbelievable, his numbers. But I'll give you one last funny one, John. How about this game? Conference USA. Jacksonville State is playing New Mexico State. And you're going to say, why in the hell do we care about that game? I'll tell you why. New Mexico State just got done beating who? Auburn. And, and they got $1.8 million to play that game and walk away with a win. They were a double-digit underdog, and they won by double digits. I mean, everything went right for a friend of mine named Jerry Kill. Jerry Kill used to coach the University of Minnesota. Jerry Kill now is New Mexico State. If Minnesota loses this weekend, John, there's a lot of people getting antsy here in Minnesota. Jerry might be getting a phone call from the University of Minnesota at some point in time. We'll see, but they're 9-3. They're playing really well, and Jerry is still in the game, John. He's still there.
It's amazing, Pete, because for those who don't follow it as closely, Gopher football as closely as Pete obviously does, you might not know that this guy collapsed on the field and was going into some sort of shock.
Yep.
He's had a bad ticker or something, Pete, in the past. I'm surprised if the Gophers do make that reach. But PJ Fleck, the coach that they've got, is also, got a few years left on a very long-term contract, Pete.
Yeah.
Another reason. But, we've seen teams do stupid stuff, especially stupid financial decisions. But I wish Jerry Kill the best. I just don't think he's going to be the next Gophers coach. But like you say, that's what the fans are chanting, or that's what they're trying to drum up support for.
Yeah.
Oregon State, Oregon all the way. Oregon State's good. I don't think they can stop Oregon. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it on Monday. I'm wrong. But I think this is going to be an interesting game, and I think Bo Nix lights them up. And, Pete, at home, Michigan loses to Ohio State.
Yeah.
There, I said it. They lose to Ohio State.
That I like that call. That's a ballsy call, because I'll tell you, Michigan at home in the big house. It's not that Jim Harbaugh is still around. The guys still know, hey, who is our head coach? They'll tell you it's still Jim Harbaugh. Now, it won't be on game days and all the rest of it, but that team is all in on him. Now, you might be right, John, and here's why. Those receivers at Ohio State are absolutely extraordinary. And then you add a couple of different running backs in there and a quarterback who just gets a little bit better every week. I don't think he's great. I'm not trying to say he's top 5 quarterbacks in the country or anything like that, but he's pretty damn good. And it makes him look even better when you've got receivers like, Marvin Harrison Jr. and some of these other guys. I mean, Ohio State every single year has receivers that are going to go in the first round. And I'll tell you what, it never ends, because this year that will continue.
Yeah. I like the way they play, Pete. It's not that I don't like the way Michigan plays, but and obviously, at least obvious to me, Pete, probably to you, I think one of the reasons they've run the ball 30 straight times is that they don't want to show Ohio State a damn thing.
Right.
They'll be working on stuff at practice. So if Ohio State was cheating and checking out their practices, I guarantee it wouldn't be all running. There'll be a lot of passing. This will be like Rocky trying to switch up to Southpaw or whatever.
South Jersey, Southpaw, or whatever.
South Jersey.
I will say this, John, and this last thing about that game. What I really love about Michigan, though, and no other team is like this, Jim Harbaugh is basically the second coming of Bo Schembechler. Because if you watch Michigan play, in my mind, it is the best front 5 offensive line in the entire country. Nobody's close. And on top of that, they oftentimes have 2, 3, or 4 tight ends on in the game. So they're playing old school football where they're going to smash you in the mouth, just like he did at Stanford, just like he did with the 49ers. And Michigan's got those same guys, those tight ends that are all 6'5" to 6'7". They're 250 to 270, and they will beat the tar out of you. So it's always interesting to me to see a team like that and how they can actually still throw the ball when you've got all those tight ends on the field. That's what's made that quarterback look pretty good. Some people think he's a Heisman type quarterback because of the fact he's got all these great tight ends. He's got good receivers. He's got great running backs and an O-line that basically keeps him from ever getting dirty. So it should be a fun game.
Oh yeah, and if indeed he pulls it off, Pete, and they beat Ohio State, that's when he's going to be. This is a Heisman level performance potentially this weekend, and the following week against Iowa. Those would be Heisman wins if he can pull those two off. But I still think Bo Nix and Penix rather. I think those are your leaders in that order. Penix and then Bo Nix. And this guy could play his way into it, though. I'm not fighting you on that.
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank our friends here at SIBO Global Markets for letting us shoot again from the trading floor. Thank you, Steve, and everybody here at SIBO Global Markets for that. And we thank all of you for joining us. We will be back Monday. We're not on tomorrow because there's no trading. So we'll see you Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.